of war is truth. They're trying to tell you that this war is a defensive war. A blind man walking down the street can see that this is pure nonsense. It's a war of aggression, the ultimate crime. These lies just don't stop. We saw it in Iraq with Tony Blair's lies about weapons of mass destruction. We saw it in the destruction of Gaza, and now we're seeing it in Iran, setting the entire Middle East, and quite likely the world, on fire. So on the day one, shortly after the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei, a girls' school was attacked. It seems there are about 175 killed, 100 more injured. The following day, I picked up the Sunday papers. One of them is the Sunday Telegraph. I've been through it several times. There's no mention of that at all. Imagine if 165 Israelis had been killed in a bomb from Iran. It would have been the story on the front. It would have been covered everywhere. But the death of 165 young girls is just of no consequence at all. So I know the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, Alistair Heath. I sent him an email saying, why didn't you cover this tragedy in the girls' school? I've not received a reply. And then I read his leader from the Telegraph. The Iranian regime is built on an Islamist doctrine which cannot meaningfully be negotiated with. It's simply untrue. The Iranians do negotiate, and they can absolutely be trusted as they stick to their promises. That was proven when Obama negotiated the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran. In 2015, they stuck to it completely religiously until Trump walked away from it. And we know from the Omani foreign minister...
What has Iran agreed to?
Is the agreement that Iran will never, ever have a nuclear material that will create a bomb. So there will be zero accumulation, zero stockpiling, and full verification. Even United States inspectors will have access.
Iranians were negotiating really hard to avoid a war. They'd actually offered a better deal than they'd signed off on in 2015. That was on the table, and that, of course, is when America and Israel struck. Charles Moore, the former editor of The Telegraph and the biographer of Maggie Thatcher, produced a puff piece on Benjamin Netanyahu as the great war leader of our age. In this puff piece, he failed to mention the fact that the International Criminal Court has charges out against Netanyahu for alleged war crimes in connection with the destruction of Gaza. The same applies in the Times. They ran a piece by Yoav Gallant, the former Israeli defense minister, advocating this war in Iran. Now, it's bad enough that they ran a piece by somebody facing war crimes charges, but not to tell their readers about it is simply disgraceful. And look at this Telegraph headline. I'm very disappointed in Keir. This is the Daily Telegraph taking the side of a foreign leader against a British Prime Minister. Now, bear in mind that foreign leader is a convicted felon. He probably committed rape. He's a proven liar. He's a bigot. He's a racist. And also the way in which they just sneer at justice and law. It says Keir Starmer has put his obsessions with international law ahead of the most fundamental duties of the state. Now, I'd like to remind Sunday Telegraph, because it's quite a significant thing to remind them of, what Maggie Thatcher said about international law. It's all we've got. In 1981, she criticised Israel very fiercely for attacking an Iraqi nuclear reactor. Monty Modlin, he was a journalist on the Jewish Chronicle, confronted her. You're selling Israel down the river. She waved her finger at him and said, international law is all we have. Once we lose it, we lose everything. And this would have been Maggie's paper. It's now just dismissing international law as some curious obsession of the British Prime Minister. All of the right-wing media have gone this way. They are blindly supporting Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu's illegal, unplanned, incredibly stupid, barbarous attack on Iran. Consequences is absolute catastrophe throughout the Middle East. The outbreak of regional war, stock markets will soon be plunging. It's clear that we face the likelihood of a global recession as oil prices spiral. We'll have some kind of civil war in Iran, and that will lead to millions of refugees fleeing for their lives. They'll come to the West, and then, of course, Nigel Farage has been one of the keenest advocates of this folly, and will then start to protest about more boat people.
I'm normally incredibly nervous about intervening in foreign wars. I believe this is the right one, and I find the actions of our Prime Minister, or the inactions, perhaps I should say, of our Prime Minister, frankly pathetic.
What you have here is a very strange phenomenon whereby the Brexiteers who decided that they were going to fight for British freedom are absolutely delighted to take the side of a foreign power which has been sponsoring what most people regard as a genocide in Gaza and is now conducting a completely illegal war in Iran. They're taking the side of that foreign leader, deeply implicated in Epstein, against a British Prime Minister who's not going far enough in his blind support for an illegal war of aggression. Now let's turn to the way that Iran is presented as a nuclear threat.
If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon.
This line has been peddled by Benjamin Netanyahu for 2 or 3 decades now.
If Iran acquires a nuclear bomb, it could use any one of these shadowy groups to threaten the United States, threaten the West.
Time is running out.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
By next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
There's no evidence of this, and there never has been any serious evidence of it, and yet constantly, and now in this conflict, Iran is presented as the nuclear risk. They don't point out that Israel has something like 200 nuclear weapons. Nobody knows for sure because they can't be inspected, because they refuse to put themselves under international regulation, like every other country which has nuclear weapons. To give one small example of this and how the media collaborates with the creation of this false picture, a little while before Israel launched its attack on Iran, there was a very significant earthquake near Dimona, which is an Israeli nuclear plant. It would have been perfectly reasonable to speculate, has Israel carried out
the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
There's no evidence of this, and there never has been any serious evidence of it, and yet constantly, and now in this conflict, Iran is presented as the nuclear risk. They don't point out that Israel has something like 200 nuclear weapons. Nobody knows for sure because they can't be inspected, because they refuse to put themselves under international regulation, like every other country which has nuclear weapons. To give one small example of this and how the media collaborates with the creation of this false picture, a little while before Israel launched its attack on Iran, there was a very significant earthquake near Dimona, which is an Israeli nuclear plant. It would have been perfectly reasonable to speculate, has Israel carried out a nuclear test? But by reading the British or American papers, you would never have the faintest idea about that. Whereas we've had repeated assertions, amplified in the media, that Iran was on the edge of producing nuclear weapons. Well, there's no evidence that this is the case, and even Donald Trump can't think so because he said their nuclear presence was absolutely wiped out a few months ago.
As you know, their sites were obliterated. They're very evil nuclear sites. They were now has been proven. And we took out 2 of the other sites also. In addition to that, we finished them off. But I don't believe that they're going to go back into nuclear anytime soon. It's been obliterated. It would be years before they could ever get going.
The media omerta about Israel's possession of nuclear weapons is especially curious when it comes from the Times newspaper, which, after all, broke the story that Mordecai Vanunu, who was part of the nuclear program, was blowing the whistle on it. So they know perfectly well what the situation really is, but you hardly ever get serious references to the fact that at the real nuclear power, unregulated, with nobody trying to exert control of them, is Israel and not Iran. Nor have I seen a single reference to the fact that Ayatollah Khamenei was doctrinally opposed to nuclear weapons.